Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is a groundbreaking series that dives into the lives of people living in the last frontier. Each episode introduces you to colorful characters from around the state. Funding for Indie Alaska is provided in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company. Catch the latest episodes at alaskapublic.org.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks again for joining us here at KAKM for this Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. Up on the warning chart here, we've got a winter storm watch out there for the higher elevations along the Klondike and Haines highways. That's for 6 to 8 inches of snow. And that's out for tomorrow and tomorrow night there for the southeast or the northern southeast coast. And back to the west here, there's still a winter weather advisory out for 1 to 3 inches of snow St. Lawrence Island there up to the Seward Peninsula coast in the western. That's due to expire at any time, so that's not going to be out for too much longer. And then finally, the high wind warnings out here for the central Aleutians and the eastern Aleutians on Alaska and the Alaska Peninsula. And looking for this high wind warnings out until midnight tonight for wind gusts to 85 miles per hour. AKwx already late at 4 o'clock, they had west winds gusting to 70 miles per hour already as that low center pulls up to the north. And then for the Fox Islands here on Alaska, Nikolsky, the greater Dutch Harbor area, that's gusts to 100 miles per hour, and that's out until 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. And then for the Alaska Peninsula, looking for gusts up to 85 miles per hour, and the warning there remains out through tomorrow into about 9 p.m. tomorrow evening. And this kind of sums up the what I just covered there, the gust 85 miles an hour here this evening, then diminishing for the central Aleutians. That low center now right about in this area here late this afternoon will move off to the northeast later on tonight and tomorrow. So the very strong winds coming down from the north there on the southwest quadrant of that system, right through there looking for gusts to 100 miles per hour. So hurricane force wind warnings out and storm warnings actually out from Sitkinak all the way west to the Shimmy and Attu area. But up to the north there, looking at northeast winds up to 70 miles per hour for the Pribilof Islands. You're going to be right on the rain and snow edge there later tonight and into tomorrow. And then for the Alaska Peninsula, look for 75 mile an hour winds increasing to 85 miles an hour in gusts, especially through the northwest oriented gaps. On the satellite imagery there over the Panhandle earlier today, had a front moving through that pushed off into Canada. And a lot of unstable air here off the Gulf of Alaska coming eastward. There are numerous showers back out through this area this afternoon. Did change over to showers over the southeast coast today and has some thunderstorms there from the Dixon entrance area, kind of scattered up along the Panhandle and off the coast. There actually some thunderstorm activity out into the central Gulf of Alaska today. And some clouds and snow here back over the Kuskokwim Valley in the western Alaska range as that weakening low pressure area that was that big storm several days ago in the northern Bering Sea over the Seward Peninsula now and gradually weakening, but still had 25 to 50 mile per hour winds out of the north and northwest here, swinging around to the west along the southwest coast today, right up into the Bering Strait. Cape Newenham seeing gusts over 60 miles an hour this morning, but those winds diminishing now. Some clearing there over the Bristol Bay area, snow showers with gusty northwest winds, temperatures just above freezing at Kodiak this afternoon. And then this big storm out here to the west, pushing the low center right about in this area here ahead of that low center was to the west of Adak. They had winds gusting up to about 67 miles per hour this morning out of the south. And again, now as this pulls up into the southern Bering Sea, they're out of the west, again gusting to 70 miles per hour. And rain's pushing into the eastern Aleutians, spreading up toward the Pribilof Islands, and then the colder air here over the northern Bering Sea wrapping back over the western areas and getting pulled into the circulation of that system. And it's going to continue deepening overnight tonight as this colder air wraps in and gets injected into the circulation there. So it's going to become quite an intense storm here as it passes to the north of the eastern Aleutians. That's the location this afternoon there in the now north into the southern Bering Sea areas. Again, this weakening system up over the Seward Peninsula with snow over the northern Koyukuk Valley. Had some moderate snow today at Tanana with precipitation extending back to the west across the Seward Peninsula. And then more steadier light snow condition here northern Bristol Bay or northeast Bristol Bay, right up along the Alaska Peninsula and the Kuskokwim Valley areas. Otherwise, you had some scattered snow showers over south central Alaska and pretty dry here over the eastern interior and basically dry up along the north slope areas. And then all the thunderstorm activity here, again, scattered thunderstorms along the southeast coast with showers and thunderstorms still out into the Gulf of Alaska with that very unstable air mass. And for tonight, showers, lowering freezing levels. So depending on your elevation there, being the form of rain and snow. Otherwise at sea level, it should stay mostly in the form of rain there for the southeast coast. Dry conditions here for the Copper River Basin back into south central Alaska. There'll still be some lingering snow showers this evening here, but mostly back along the Alaska Range areas and up to the north. Still looking at an area of light snow from the southern Brooks Range through the Koyukuk Valley back out there toward eastern Norton Sound area, possibly as far west as Selawik. Otherwise, this is the feature here, pretty fierce storm, 957 millibars, very tight gradient there from the Pribilofs back across the eastern Aleutian areas. Rain, strong winds here across the Alaska Peninsula pushing up into Bristol Bay. And then coming back around that, the cold air sweeping southward once again, rain and snow showers into the central Aleutians. Winds diminish as you head out to the west. And some light snow here from the St. Lawrence Island area up through the Bering Strait. And looking ahead to tomorrow, we'll see that low tracks eastward, due eastward there to just southwest of Kodiak Island. And that tight pressure gradient now across the Alaska Peninsula. And tomorrow afternoon, winds will begin to diminish here over the eastern Aleutians as well as the Pribilof Island areas. Snow showers for the central and western Aleutians, and kind of a mixed condition there as the colder air begins to spread back in over the Alaska Peninsula with rain, Kodiak Island, and strong gales and storm force winds in advance of this front here, lifting up to the western Gulf of Alaska and into the Barren Islands, southern Cook Inlet. Mixture of rain and snow along the North Gulf Coast, and then this moisture streaming up to about Port Alexander and Sitka. Otherwise, kind of a break, so to speak, there over the southeast coast. And looking at the Thursday forecast, that front moves quite rapidly all the way into western Canada by Thursday afternoon or later in the afternoon Thursday there. And strong low now in the Gulf of Alaska, so look for gale force winds here along the coast and rain and snow over the inland areas there, especially the higher elevations with a lot of showers and rain back out to the west. Several impulses of moisture is going to keep it quite unsettled and wet there over the southeast coast for Thursday night, probably into Friday as well. But colder and drier air sweeping southward into Kodiak Island, gusty northwest winds. That same pattern up across south central Alaska. Looks to be partly and mostly sunny here in that area with colder temperatures. A few flurries over the southeast interior, basically dry through interior Alaska. Snow showers right along the southwest coast and a big area of light snow and snow showers here over the southeast Bering Sea as that very cold air comes out over the warmer water there. And that'll spread snow all the way down to the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutian areas. Temperatures this afternoon over the southeast coast were in the mid to upper 30s to mid 40s there with 45 down at Klawak. 34 degrees reported at McGrath this afternoon, 34 also at Cordova. Valdez checked in with 30 degrees, as did Anchorage and Kenai. 25 up at Talkeetna, chillier 17 there at Gulkana, just 5 degrees at Northway, 6 at Fairbanks, and 11 degrees at Delta. Up to the north, temperatures at Bethel's 21 degrees with some light snow, but skies were clear, 15 below zero at Arctic Village, Umiat at 4 below, and kind of a range along the Arctic coast there, 0 both at Nuiqsut and Dead Horse, Barrow up to 15. That temperature matched over at Point Lay. Then into the upper 20s here, Point Hope back down to Kotzebue, and 30 degrees across the Seward Peninsula. And back down to the south, the Monarch had 31 degrees this afternoon, 27 out there at Savunga, 29 in McGrath, and a 25 at Sparivon. Bethel reported 30 degrees, 34 at Macoriac, and that same temperature reported at St. Paul. 43 at Nikolsky, Unalaska at 41, but up to 48 at Atka. Colder air, 33 degrees at Chimia with snow showers. Lower 40s, upper 30s, lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. Actually, only Sand Point reached anywhere near or above 40, with 37 over at Kodiak. And for the lows tonight, below 0 here over the eastern interior, coldest up there around Arctic Village, and could drop a little below 0 there for the North Slope, but much milder here, contrasted back to the southwest there in the 20s here, and then up to 30s Alaska Peninsula, and mostly in the upper 20s to upper 30s there for the southeast coast. Highs for tomorrow, single numbers, all eastern interior where it'll be the coldest. Same thing for the North Slope, much a little milder here, mid to upper 20s over the Seward Peninsula, and then 30s and 40s, Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, and then cooling off there over the western and central Aleutians. For flying weather, marginal VFR lifting northward and then southward, mostly along the Alcan border there. And again, it's kind of a break coming through ahead of the system as it pushes eastward, and that IFR zone along and in advance of the frontal system right up in that southeast flow. So IFR showing up for western Prince William Sound along the south coast of the Seward Peninsula and possibly in Akamashiak Bay, and then becoming marginal there for Kodiak Island. Look for some marginal conditions across Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, and in a swath northward there over the eastern Bering Sea all the way up into the Chukchi, and IFR along and south of the Brooks Range, and IFR also for the western Arctic coastal areas, and marginal VFR over areas of the Bering Sea. Passes for Anatuvik, lowest conditions, probably IFR in the southern entrance, otherwise marginal tomorrow. That same pattern also in store for Adigan. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR, but higher conditions, probably marginal on the western entrance with rainy, occasional IFR, but again higher on that western entrance. And for windy, starting out marginal, becoming VFR. Isabel looks pretty marginal, but Mentasta should stay VFR. Tanita looking VFR as well. Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels at the surface late tonight here, right up along the southwest coast, kind of down across northern Cook Inlet, 2,000 to 4,000 feet over the southern southeast coast, and then that warmer air nudging northward here ahead of that strong storm system. Again, late tonight, that whole pattern shifting eastward throughout the day tomorrow as the front advances to the east. And for icing, could be occasional widespread moderate along in advance of that front, spreading up to the Kenai Peninsula, across the Barrens into Kamashiak Bay, not above about 6,000 feet, and then the colder air mass here above about 2,000 feet, but only light to isolated moderate rime and mixed icing here over the southeast Bering Sea, Alaska Peninsula, and that kind of pulling away from the eastern Aleutians. Winds aloft at 33,000 feet. We've got that upper level low associated with the intense storm and a 120 knot jet there, and then westerly flow through the central interior there coming out of the Russian Far East, about 40 to 60 knots, but really the storm track suppressed well to the south. And at 9,000 feet, looking at south to southeast winds up to 55 knots for the Gulf of Alaska, back in across the Barren Islands, easterlies 35 knots across the southwest interior, strong northwest winds 75 knots blowing across the Alaska Peninsula, 50 knots there for the eastern Aleutians, diminishing off to the west, much lighter and more variable up over the central and northern interior areas, and southerly winds on the increase for the southeast coast. And 65 knot northwesterlies at 3,000 feet there for the Alaska Peninsula, east 30 to 50 knots across southern Alaska, northerlies 30 knots through the Bering Strait, and about 35 to 40 knots over the southeast Bering Sea, diminishing to the west, and then lighter winds from the south over the Panhandle. Looking at turbulence, severe, especially for small aircraft here from the Gulf of Alaska and across the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet. That'll blow about 4,000 feet, and a bigger area severe here for the Alaska Peninsula and on off to the southwest. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Alaska, the Great Land. Wild. Rugged. And inaccessible. This remoteness is a great challenge for Forest Service employees who oversee the management of this untamed land. It is the helicopter that is providing access to many remote locations, enabling the Forest Service to accomplish a wide variety of projects that otherwise would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to perform. Helicopters are used for a variety of jobs. Personnel transportation, movement of cargo and project materials, reconnaissance and wildlife surveys, aerial seeding and fish transplanting, and fire management.
This briefing is an introduction to you, the helicopter user, to provide you with the necessary information to safely plan and participate in Forest Service helicopter operations in Alaska.
When your job duties call for helicopter use, you will need to plan your flight carefully and complete a flight request form with the forest dispatcher or the forest helicopter operations specialist. The information on this request will include dates and specific times of day, passengers' names and weights, the type of cargo you're taking, the departure point and your destination. You will also include any special problems or considerations in this report. These might include logistics support, special equipment, hazardous materials, or possibly landing site difficulties. If you're planning a special use mission, such as a sling operation, you will need to involve the helicopter operations specialist early in the planning process. These operations require close supervision, and you will probably also be required to write a specific project plan and hazard analysis for your job. You should also have a plan for alternate projects that can be done if bad weather won't allow you to operate at your original work site. On the day of your flight, make sure that you have all your necessary gear. This will include maps and aerial photos of your work area, and these will help you to select landing and pickup sites. You will also need your work equipment and your own personal survival gear. It's a good idea to pack warm clothing and anything else you might need in case bad weather interferes with your pickup. You will be asked to give weather information by radio before your helicopter returns to pick you up. Remember that Region 10 policy requires a minimum of a 500-foot ceiling and a half-mile visibility. Maximum winds should not exceed 30 miles an hour. Be sure to be at the departure point prior to your scheduled flight time. The helicopter manager will try to schedule your flight as close as possible to your requested time. But remember that other work crews will probably be going out either right before or after you. And if you're late, they're late. The helicopter manager is in charge of all helicopter operations. The manager's job is to assist the pilot and make sure that all passengers conduct themselves safely around the helicopter. Before you fly, the helicopter manager will give you a hands-on safety briefing for the helicopter that you will be flying in. This briefing will include both the location and the operation of safety equipment, your personal protective equipment, and standard procedures that you will follow while working in and around helicopters. In Region 10, all passengers and crew members are required to wear personal protective equipment. These include a highly visible orange Nomex flight suit, Nomex gloves, a flight helmet, and a flotation survival vest. Rubber or leather boots at least 8 inches high are also required. In your safety briefing, you will learn how to wear and adjust this safety equipment. Your briefing will also include the proper approach and departure routes when moving around a helicopter. You should always approach the helicopter from the front, but only after instruction by the pilot or helicopter manager. There is no reason to feel rushed or to hurry when moving around a helicopter, and you should be careful when carrying your gear to and from the helicopter. Long items should be carried low and parallel to the ground. Loose clothing, such as hats, should be removed before your approach to keep them from being swept into the rotor. Never approach the helicopter from behind or from upslope. This will prevent accidentally walking into the main or tail rotor system. Tail rotors become very difficult to see in certain light situations and travel at speeds that make them virtually invisible. Heat from the engine exhaust jet can result in severe burns. After safely approaching the helicopter manager will assist you to safely store your gear. Become familiar with the operation of the passenger doors and latches, and also the handholds and footsteps. Be careful to step over the skids to keep from damaging the pop-out floats. These are used if an emergency water landing is necessary. Also, let the helicopter manager know in advance if you are transporting firearms and/or hazardous materials. These may have to be transported in special containers or be stowed in a special way.
Inside waters, southwest 20 for Clarence Strait, southerlies 10 to 20 knots for the central and northern inside channels, and small craft advisories here, southerly winds for the central coast, southwest there for the extreme south coast, and southeast at about 20 for the north coast. For Thursday, gales here for the north coast, south 40 knots, and then southwesterlies at 30 knots here along the south coastal areas. Small craft advisories all through the inside waters from the south, southeast to 25 to 30 knots. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, easterlies at 35 knots. We've got strong gales here for the northern Gulf of Alaska with higher gusts. Storm warnings here from the western Gulf across the Barren Islands. Northeast increasing to 60 knots for Kamishak Bay. South 45 for Kodiak. 55 knot northeast winds for southern Cook Inlet and gales to the north. For Thursday, winds diminish, still looking at gale force northwesterlies here for Kodiak Island and northwest 35 knots across Kamishak Bay into the Barren Islands, north 35 for the North Gulf Coast, winds northerly diminishing to 20 knots for Prince William Sound. And for Bristol Bay, a full gale tomorrow out of the northeast, and then hurricane force westerlies here for the Alaska Peninsula south side, northwest 60 with 25-foot seas there on the Bering Sea side, and southwesterly storms with 32-foot seas and higher gusts there for the areas southwest of Kodiak Island. And then for Thursday, we've got minimum gales here for Bristol Bay all the way down along the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, and strong gales with higher gusts here out of the northwest from Cape Sarachev all the way up to Sitkinak. For the Aleutians, eastern Aleutians tomorrow, hurricane force winds northwest 70 knots, seas 35 feet on average there, and then winds diminishing to 35 knots throughout the day here for the central Aleutians, and then out to the west, winds even become lighter, coming down to 20 knots. And for Thursday, westerlies at 20 here for the far western Aleutians, small craft advisory here for the west central Aleutians, northwesterlies about 30 knots all the way across the Fox Islands. For the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, a full gale there with north at 40 knots, northwest 45 knots tomorrow afternoon for the Pribilofs. Those will be stronger out of the northeast tonight, and 30-knot winds here along the southwest coast. Northwest 25 knots for the Pribilofs, and then we still have gales here for the areas west of Kamishak Bay. Freezing spray spreading into the northern Bering Sea, and northwest 25 for St. Lawrence Island. For the Arctic coast, not too bad on the winds tomorrow, kind of variable on the east side, but northeasterlies at about 10 knots here along much of the coastline, and from Wales to Cape Beaufort, northerlies at about 15 knots with freezing spray. And then for Thursday, north about 20 knots, and that's the strongest winds for these northern areas there. North 15 from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, and then a little more northeasterly here for the western Arctic coast. Otherwise, from the around Barrow all the way to the east, light northerly winds at 10 to 15. And for tonight, again, lots of showers rolling into the southeast coast with lowering snow levels there, but should stay mostly in the form of rain all the way at sea level. But with any elevation at all, it'll be mixing with rain. Drying out here over southern Alaska and the southeast interior, some snow up here to the northeast. And then the high wind warnings for this evening for the central Aleutians, strong winds and rain here for the Alaska Peninsula. And again, those gusts increasing to about 100 miles an hour for the eastern Aleutians, and that storm shifts eastward to southwest of Kodiak. And again, the strong gale force winds and storms in advance of that front coming up to the North Gulf Coast, and then cooling off on the northwest wind, so rain changing and mixing with snow there for the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. And then that shifts into the Gulf of Alaska and bears down on the Panhandle on Thursday. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.